thought it was the perfect start to their new life together. Ethan and Lydia Caldwell had just moved into a quiet house in Cedar Creek, Montana, a gift from her father, surrounded by forest and autumn air. But what waited inside those walls wasn't peace or privacy. It was a whisper, a voice neither of them could explain, and a secret that had been buried beneath the trees for years. Tonight's story isn't about monsters or legends. It's about what happens when the past decides it's not done with you. This is the Cedar Creek House.
In late October, when the maples around Cedar Creek, Montana turned the color of rusted pennies, Ethan and Lydia Caldwell arrived at the house her father had given them. It sat 3 miles off the county road, an aging 2-story wooden home, its porch sagging slightly as if tired from the years. The locals called the property the Merrin Place. No one had lived there since the 1980s. They unloaded their things in the crisp air, the scent of pine and damp leaves filling their lungs. Lydia pressed a hand against her belly. She was 5 months pregnant, and smiled. "Dad said the foundation's solid," she told Ethan. "Sure," he said, eyeing the house's dark windows. "Just needs a little Wi-Fi and a coat of paint." Inside, it smelled faintly of old varnish and cedar. Dust motes floated like pale insects through the light. Every board creaked with memory. They spent the first 2 days setting up. Router in the den, crib in the small upstairs room with the bay window. Neighbors were scarce. Only one mailbox appeared on the entire gravel road. They were alone, but they didn't mind. For a while, it felt peaceful. Until the 3rd night. The whispers. It started with a sound, faint, like fabric dragging over wood. Lydia woke at 2 a.m., convinced she'd heard someone walking in the hallway. Ethan checked. Nothing. Just the house settling. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that something watched from the dark corners of the hallway.
Over the next week, small things began to shift. The kitchen chair was out of place. A framed photo tilted itself, and then came the voices, whispers that seemed to rise from beneath the floorboards when Lydia was alone. At first, she blamed the wind through the vents. Then one afternoon, while grading papers at the dining table, she heard a man's breath at her ear. "Help me!" She froze. The baby kicked. That night, she told Ethan. "Stress," he said softly, pulling her close. "You're teaching, moving, pregnant. It's a lot. Your mind's just processing." But 2 nights later, he heard it too. The same whisper, the same desperate tone, just behind his left shoulder while he brushed his teeth. He turned, expecting Lydia. Nothing. Only the faint tap of water in the sink and the mirrored reflection of his own pale face. They stopped sleeping well after that. Ethan installed cameras, motion sensors, anything logical. Nothing abnormal appeared. Yet both swore they saw shapes moving at the edges of their vision. It wasn't the shrieking, ghostly spectacle of movies. It was subtle, patient. Like the house itself was watching, waiting. Autumn deepened. Frost painted the windows. At dusk, fog rolled down from the hills and wrapped the yard like smoke. Inside, whispers grew into faint conversations they could almost understand. Half sentences about the creek, the badge, and no one found him. Lydia started keeping a notebook of everything she heard or dreamed. Her handwriting changed, tight, slanted, like she was channeling someone else. When Ethan asked about it, she said, "I'm trying to make sense of his messages." "Whose?" "The man in the hall." "The one wearing a hat." Ethan didn't say a word. "Let's go to bed," he said gently, leading her to the bedroom. In his mind, he wondered if the pregnancy was making her hallucinate, but she wasn't. On Halloween night, they saw him for the first time, together. Rain lashed against the windows, branches scratched the siding like fingernails. They went to bed early, exhausted. Sometime after midnight, Lydia stirred and saw an old man standing at the foot of the bed. His clothes looked like a sheriff's uniform, faded brown, the badge dulled by dirt. His eyes were sunken, his mouth moving as if he were drowning on air. "Help me," he said. Ethan woke at the same instant. His heart hammered. He saw him too. The man's boots dripped with mud, leaving dark prints across the floor toward the window. Then he was gone. They both bolted upright, gasping, staring at the same empty space. A dream, they thought, but the floor really was wet. Neither could explain it. They stayed up until dawn, drinking coffee and trying to rationalize. By sunrise, they'd made a decision: leave the house at least for a few days. But when they stepped outside, the world looked wrong.
The dirt road that led back to the county highway was gone, swallowed by trees. Ethan's phone had no service. The compass on his watch spun aimlessly. It was as if the house had moved farther into the forest overnight. Lydia's breath hitched. "Ethan, the maples weren't this close yesterday." He didn't answer. He was staring at the tree line, because there, standing among the trunks, was the same man from their dream, motionless, waiting. He lifted a trembling hand and gestured for them to follow. Ethan's instinct said not to follow, but the woods were unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed to wait. They walked anyway, slowly, Lydia clutching his sleeve, leaves whispering underfoot. The man stayed a few paces ahead, the fog swallowing him to the shoulders. When he stopped, they saw why. At his boots, half hidden beneath twisted roots, lay a shallow pit. The soil looked freshly disturbed, damp and dark against the autumn carpet of leaves. The man knelt beside it, pointing at the ground. His voice came again, clearer this time, the tone more pleading than frightening. "Find me." Then he was gone. The fog folded in on itself, leaving only silence and that hollow patch of earth. Ethan crouched, running his hand over the surface. His fingers came away gritty with old dirt and something metallic. A button, tarnished but engraved with a small 5-pointed star. Lydia recognized it first. "A badge," she whispered. They hurried back to the house, and for the first time in 2 days, Ethan's phone lit up with a signal. 1 bar, then 2. He called the local sheriff's office and gave rough coordinates, repeating the same story twice because he didn't believe himself. Within an hour, lights flickered through the fog, 4 patrol trucks, tires crunching over roots. The Caldwells guided them to the site. Officers in heavy jackets worked under portable lamps, spades cutting into the earth. After 15 minutes, one of them called out. Something metallic had surfaced, the rest of the badge, and beneath it, the shape of an old belt buckle and fragments of uniform cloth. The lead deputy looked at the couple with a face caught between skepticism and gratitude. "We'll take it from here," he said quietly. They were escorted back to the porch, wrapped in blankets, asked the usual questions: how long they'd been there, who told them to dig, why they thought to call. Ethan told the truth, every strange detail. The deputy only nodded, scribbling without comment. At dawn, the sheriff himself arrived. His expression shifted when he saw the recovered badge. He'd seen its twin before. It belonged to Deputy Harold Finch, a veteran officer who disappeared 6 years earlier while tracking a poacher near Cedar Creek. The official record had said body never recovered. The deer was done. The Caldwells moved out that same day. Lydia's father arranged for movers to collect what little they'd brought. Neither she nor Ethan spoke much during the drive into town. When they stopped at a diner on the highway, Lydia glanced at her phone. A local news alert had already appeared. Remains believed to be missing deputy found outside Cedar Creek. Investigation reopened. That night, they checked into a small motel near Missoula. The bedspread smelled of bleach and old cigarette smoke, but for the first time in weeks, they slept. Only Lydia woke around 3 a.m. to a soft knock at the window. She pulled back the curtain. The parking lot was empty, the neon vacancy sign buzzing through mist. But on the inside of the glass, a faint handprint had appeared, larger than Ethan's, outlined in condensation. Across the center, someone had traced 2 words, "Thank you." The print faded as she watched. When morning came, the mark was gone. A week later, the sheriff's department confirmed through DNA that the remains were indeed Deputy Finch's. The discovery solved one part of the mystery, but created others. His last known location had been 12 miles east, on the opposite side of the ridge. No one could explain how his body ended up near the Merrin place. The case file listed the manner of death as undetermined. Ethan and Lydia never returned to Cedar Creek. The house stood empty again, its windows reflecting nothing but trees and the slow turning of leaves. Locals say that on cold autumn nights, a porch light flickers even though the power's been cut for years. And sometimes, when the wind is still, you can hear a man's voice drifting through the timber, a low plea carried by the creek itself. Find me.